Alright guys, so this is part 2 of my video. So for part 1 I covered the dark side of interracial dating. Now I'm going to cover the Asian identity crisis. I'll give you guys one example as a continuation to part 1. In a lot of cases, what if these retired old white men, these foreign sexpats, they're coming to Southeast Asia and they married a extremely young Asian woman, and let's say if they had a baby, they had a daughter. And so people in Southeast Asia, they're very much accustomed to this. They think this is very normal. Now, here's one thing that you guys cannot dispute. So white people do have recessive genes. It's very obvious if you look at these mixed race children. So usually if a white person marries a black person, 80 to 90% of the time that baby is going to come out looking black. And there's nothing controversial or racist about this. For example, look at someone like Barack Obama. He can pass as a 100% African. And it's typically the same if a white person marries an Asian person, 80 to 90% of the time that baby is going to come out Asian looking. It's also the same, if an Asian person marries a black person, because generally speaking, black people, they have the most dominant gene. Vast majority of the time, the baby is going to come out black looking. And I can cover more of this later. But let's say, for example, right, this old white guy, let's say if this 65-year-old dude, he marries a 20-year-old Cambodian woman, and they have a daughter. And once his daughter grows up, once she's a little bit older, once she's like let's say 16 or 18 or 20, every time this old white guy he takes his daughter out, everybody's going to think that the daughter is his wife, because the vast majority of the time the daughter is probably going to look 100% Asian. And so many Asian locals are so accustomed to seeing these old white men with a much younger Asian woman, and after a while that can drive you insane, because this is not just a once in a blue moon, an extremely rare occurrence. It's going to happen to you pretty much every single time. Wherever you go, everybody's going to think that this old white guy is actually your husband, and that you're just some cheap Asian gold digger. And after a while, it can drive these half Asian girls into insanity. And it's so obvious. There's so many examples of these cases in the West as well. A lot of these half Asian people or full Asian people, let's say if they came to Western countries at a very young age, or if they were born and raised in a Western country, these people are typically called bananas. So yellow on the outside, white on the inside. So if it's the opposite, if it's a white guy, but he acts Asian all the time, got this weird fetish about Asian women, so that guy is typically called an egg. Obviously, so egg is white on the outside, yellow on the inside. And there's also terms for Indian people who are, let's say, born and raised in Western countries. They'll be called coconuts. Now, of course, brown on the outside, white on the inside. So I'll give you guys a few examples with these Asians who are struggling from identity crisis. I'll keep this part quite brief because due to YouTube community guidelines, and also if I talk too much about this, this video can get demonetized or age restricted. I want to keep things PG-13. There's a couple of Asian girls. One of them is a half Asian. Her real name is Kelly Baltazar, and well, she rose to fame on the internet. How many years has it been? It must be 10 years now, possibly 12 or 14. By the way, so her father is this multi-millionaire. He works at the Goldman Sachs, and he married a Chinese woman, and she's the product of their marriage. She's the mixed race, the Wasian. And I think almost every single guy has seen the face of this girl. I mean, she was all over the internet. I want to keep this PG-13. So basically, just 5 days after she turned 18, she auditioned to be an actress. But once again, there's not a whole lot of acting involved, and she ended up auditioning for 3 scenes. Now, I don't know about the exact details, but I've read somewhere that for those 3 scenes combined, she was paid $600 US. She was paid $200 each for each scene. So which means that obviously she's not even doing it for the money. She's suffering from some real mental struggles. And she said that her reasoning behind her, auditioning for those scenes is because she was constantly being bullied for the entirety of her life due to the fact that she's a Wasian, and her dad is some lizard-looking, pasty-faced, low testosterone white guy, and basically her mom was some Chinese gold digger who only loved him for his money. But I mean, that girl's got a lot of issues. I can't believe she got married actually to a white guy. I mean, that's pretty much the biggest L you can take. And of course, if you look at the male side as well, there's that guy Elliot Rodger, and I think everybody has seen that documentary during the course of the lockdown. I think that guy went pretty viral. Once again, his last name is Rodger, so he's the product of a white father and a Asian mother, so he's a Wasian, born and raised in the United States. But, well, I mean, this guy's got all kinds of issues, right? He's known as the incel killer virgin. But this is all very, very dark stuff. I'm not going to dive into too much detail, but I want to share this point with you guys. I think so many Asians can resonate. So this is a term, I mentioned this in previous videos in China. It's called 30年河东, 30年河西, which means that for 30 years, the river will flow to the east, and for another 30 years, the tide will turn, and the river will flow to the west. I think, yeah, that is actually the perfect phrase to describe what is happening right now. Let's say, if we dial the clock back 40 years, let's say if it was 1985, or even just 30 years, like that old Chinese saying, if it's 1995, for average Chinese citizen, I think it made sense. If you actually have the opportunity and if you have the finances, if you meet the necessary requirements to actually apply for immigration, to actually move to a country like US or Canada or Australia or New Zealand or UK. But just looking at the Western civilization now in 2025, I mean, there's a disaster coming. Everything's progressing backwards. I think, honestly, if you're a Chinese couple, you think you actually want to, just immigrate to the United States or actually just send your child to the US to study. I think that is a terrible idea. And I think a lot of Chinese people are catching on to this and they realize that, the grass is not greener on the other side. What is the actual saying in China is that, the moon is not more round in the Western countries. And honestly, one of the major contributing factors to the downfall of Western civilizations, there are way too many immigrants. I came to Canada as an immigrant myself. Immigration can work, but there has to be strict requirements. You can't just be letting everybody in. Canada, for a country of 41 million people. So right now, Canada is letting over 1 million people a year. No economy can handle this. No infrastructure can handle this. No housing market can handle this. How is the government going to create the jobs for these immigrants? How is the government going to be able to build enough houses for these people? So, I mean, there's already a scarcity of jobs. There's a scarcity of housing. There's a scarcity of resources. And you keep bringing in over 1 million people a year. And what's going to end up happening is that there's going to be a massive civil war. And this is going to be a massive struggle for if you're one of those, they call it, I think, CBC. The young people, they keep making up these crazy terms like Canadian-born Chinese. I'm not talking about the news network, CBC. For me, I think, I'm one of the lucky ones. For example, let's say, if I'm actually financially stable, if I have cleared off all my debt, and for someone like me, I can, let's say, book a flight back to China, and I can just stay there for 3, 5, 7, or even 10 years. I can live there no problem at all. I was just there for 6 months. I visited many different parts of China. Went to 24 different cities, from mega cities to small towns to villages. I had zero problems at all. But that's going to be a massive problem. Like if you're someone who is a full ethnic Chinese, but let's say if you're born and raised in America or Canada or the UK, and the responsibility falls on the parents as well. So I understand, these kids, they just want to play video games. They want to slack off. They want to procrastinate. But you have to force these people to actually learn. If you're someone who is, looks just like me, who is full ethnic Chinese, you have to be fluent in Putonghua. Putonghua is Mandarin Chinese. It's the second most spoken language in the world. And if you're someone who looks like me, and if you have zero proficiency at all in terms of reading, writing, or speaking Mandarin Chinese, you're going to be screwed. Because, what if one day America or Canada just completely falls apart? It turns into a third world country. Let's say for other Chinese people, they have the opportunity to say that, things are not working out. I can just move back to China. I can find a job. I can live there. But you can't, because you can't even communicate with the locals there. You can only speak English. Maybe you have some proficiencies from school. Maybe you learn some Quebec French, or if you're born and raised in the US, maybe you speak a little bit of Spanish. But that's not going to help you when you move to an Asian country. So what are you going to do then? And I mean, you have completely lost your identity. You have become a banana, even though you look 100% Asian. But all you do is order iced cappuccinos from Tim Hortons. Most of your diet is either Subway or Burger King or Harvey's or KFC. You don't even eat Chinese food. You don't know anything about the Chinese culture. You cannot read any of the Chinese characters, and you cannot communicate with local Chinese people. What are you going to do then? And there's so much more to that. For example, I can still get a visa to China because my mom has never left the country. She's a Chinese citizen. She has lived there for the entirety of her life. If it wasn't for my mom, I wouldn't be able to get a Chinese visa. Well, of course I can. It will be one of those tourist visas for a maximum of 30 days. So basically, I can only go back to China for a very, very short term, just for vacations. That's pretty much it. So this is also a massive issue. Countries like China, they don't allow a dual citizenship. And there are many reasons for this. Honestly, I think it's for the better. For example, I don't think any American politician should be allowed to hold dual citizenship. If someone's a dual citizen of Israel and the United States, then I don't think they should be able to actually run for Congress to actually become a House representative or a member of the Senate. So this issue obviously can be controversial, but I think China not allowing dual citizenship is probably the better option. But here's the issue. Let's say if both of your parents they decided that life in America or Canada was going to be better, and let's say 30 years ago they left everything behind, they gave up their Chinese citizenship, and let's say if they became an American or a Canadian or a UK citizen, and let's say if you're a second generation immigrant, you were born raised in America or Canada, but if both of your parents are Canadian or American citizens, and both of these countries have birthright citizenship, that means that you can't go back to China. If you actually want to go back and live there, let's say if things are just not working out for you in the West, I mean, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to actually get a Chinese visa to live and work there, because both of your parents have already given up their Chinese citizenship, and you cannot get a visa through like your sister or uncle or cousin or something. It has to be one of your parents, not even a grandparent, not even a stepmom or a stepdad. So this is going to be a massive crisis for a lot of Asians who are living in the West, especially, if you came here at a very young age, you don't understand anything about Asian culture, you cannot speak the language, especially, if both of your parents have given up their Chinese citizenship. As these Western nations continue to go into a decline, I mean, you're pretty much stuck here in a limbo, especially, if at one point a civil war erupts with, let's say, with the white people versus all the non-white immigrants, things are going to get really nasty. And then what are you going to do then? Because you cannot just, book a flight and, let's say, go back to living in China. I mean, you're going to be stuck between a rock and Drake's penis, basically. What do I mean by Drake's penis? So, you're going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place. And also that is one major aspect of the dark side of interracial dating and marriage. If your interracial marriage falls apart, you have a half white, half Asian children. And let's say if you as an Asian woman, if you want to go back to Korea, if you want to go back to Japan or the Philippines or China, what about your mixed race children? Things are going to be extremely difficult for them. And obviously there are people out there who are going to be saying that, oh, that's so pessimistic, not all marriages end in divorce. But the reality is that 1 out of 2 modern marriages end in divorce. So, I mean, after you end up in a divorce, things are going to get really nasty for your mixed race children. There's so much to consider. So if you guys are wondering why I decided to cover this topic, I think, a lot of people in Asian countries, they're just stuck in their old ways. They think that America is still the best country in the world. And they think that by leaving everything behind, by moving to a Western country, things will be so much better. But honestly, at this point, Western countries are not doing better. So if you're actually thinking of immigrating to a Western country, I highly recommend you actually canceling your plans, because you might be thinking that you will be chasing your American dream, but at the end of the day, you're actually chasing a total nightmare. You'll be stuck washing dishes at some Chinese restaurant who is paying you half of minimum wage. And basically, you'll become a wage slave for the rest of your lives. And if you're Asian American couple or Asian Canadian couple, you need to teach your children their own native language. They have to become fluent in Mandarin Chinese, in Korean, in Japanese. And they actually have to understand the history of their country. They have to understand how the things actually work, so that one day, if things are not working out for the West, they will have the option to return to their home country. Because there's a massive storm brewing for Western countries. And I'm going to stop the topic right here. I don't want this video to be extremely long. So for the next video, I'm going to flip the script. I'm going to switch the roles. I'm going to talk about interracial relationships and marriages with Asian male and the white female. By the way, I don't think this trend is actually going to ever take off. And I will tell you guys exactly why. So I'm going to save that topic for the next video. Thank you guys so much for clicking on this video and watching all the way until the end. If you guys enjoyed this video, if you guys want to see more of my contents, please consider subscribing and turn on the notification button. And I will see you guys for the next video, where I will talk about Asian male and white female relationships.